'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through Kirkcaldy we asked, "Who's the gaffer?" It seemed like nobody. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, holes cut in the back just to annoy Blair. The supporters were nestled all snug in their beds, with visions of playoffs danced in their heads. In my Rovers hoodie and my Rovers cap, I'd just settled my brain for a long winter's nap. When out on the pitch there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave a lustre of floodlights to objects below. When what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature coach and 11 wee players, with a couple of drivers so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Potsy and Mick. More rapid than eagles their courses they came, and they whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Hanlon, now Murray, now Dicko and Freeman, on Mullen, on LJ, on Bruni, on Easton, to the top of the park to get back the ball. Now press away, press away, press away all. As leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with a tackle they mount to the sky. So up to the rooftop the courses they flew, with the coach full of players and the managers too. And then from the main stand I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each football boot. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney John Potter came with a bound. He was dressed all in Joma from his head to his soles, and his clothes were all tarnished with those wee rubber balls. A bundle of bibs he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His jumper, it wasn't too tight or too brown. Not like the last guy, he's not going to skip town. A new man will come, he's just the caretaker, but it's January soon, so we best get a shake on. The cap of a pen he held tight in his teeth. There's no time for all that. We've got Livy to beat. He flipped over a chart and started to scribble, plotting more paths for Aidan to dribble. He was ready and eager, a jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know we had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, wrote up 4-2-3-1, and then turned with a jerk. And laying his finger aside of his nose and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his coach, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew, not unlike Partick Thistle. But I heard him exclaim, as they drove out of sight, "Come on the Rovers to all, it'll all be all right." Thank you for joining us here on the increasingly self-indulgent Oh No 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 podcast.
Oh my God, that was, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that was one take. I was so nervous. That last 30 seconds, I was like, don't stumble now. Don't stumble now. Mate, well played.
Absolutely.
That's the highlight of the season so far. Right there.
Claimed you'd done no prep for this.
Well, what I've done is absolutely give no consideration whatsoever to the football match that's taking place, because I have been rewriting Christmas poetry for the last 24 or 48 hours. I was never going to get through that a second time. I'm really glad that I managed to get that all out in the one go. Yes, this is the Oh No 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 podcast. My name is Duncan Cameron. And as you say, this is ostensibly a preview of a football match between Wraith Rovers and Livingston. I've given it no mind whatsoever, but luckily I am joined by two voices you've already heard. Two guys who do know what they're talking about. First of all, we've got Allan Douglas Munn. How are you, Allan?
Taken aback by the claim that I know what I'm talking about. That's the whole one. But no, I'm good. Enjoying some good time with the family over the festive period. Almost certainly going to be spoiled by 90 minutes of rubbish on Saturday, but never mind. We'll go anyway, and we'll have a laugh.
Fair play. And we've got Blair Hopcroft as well. How are you, Blair?
I am all Christmased out after that, mate. That, honestly, I can't tell you how impressive that was. That was so good. Nothing. The thing is, we've peaked. We're 3 minutes in, and everything is downhill from here. Wonderful.
Yeah, I've not spoken to my wife this Christmas. I've just been
worth it.
Just been
worth
shopping. Right, let's try and make a preview out of this, which I think,
if we must,
tricky. A tricky brief. This one, I think, given everything that's been going on, nothing's really sort of changed in terms of information in the kind of public sphere. We've not really had much in the way of kind of communication at Stark's Park for understandable reasons. It has literally been Christmas. But Blair, given a couple of days to kind of percolate on the Neill Collins of it all, has your opinion kind of shifted? Have you got a new way of looking at things and where we go from here?
Oh, I still think he's a dick. Other than that, not a lot. I must admit, I it's something I don't often do. I listened back. I hate listening to a podcast when I'm on it, so I don't usually do it. But I did listen back to the emergency pod, and I keep fixating on that positive spin that you put on things. You know, like Neill Collins wasn't setting the header alight. And actually, I listened. The point I made about Neill Collins' first 12 games in charge and Ian Murray's last 12 games in charge were literally in the same place we were when Ian Murray was in charge. And someone's paid us some money for him to go away and for us to try again. Maybe, I don't know, like I'm a big believer that what's for you will not go by you. So, you know, maybe this is a blessing in disguise, and in the long run it'll be a good thing. It's just so hard to be positive when there isn't even one name that I go, man, see if it's him, yes. I mean, if it's anybody else, I might be a bit disappointed or whatever. There's not even one name that's come out where I'm going, yes, yeah, we get him, this'll all be okay. So that the board's going to have to play a bit of a blinder, I think, for this to end up being a positive. But there's no reason they won't. There's no reason they can't. They clearly are thinking differently, or they have been thinking differently to previous boards. The one thing I keep clinging to is that at no point did they seem to be entertaining, you know, getting Dick Campbell in, or one of those kind of daft left field, get one of the regular routine kind of Scottish merry-go-round managers in. They were looking for, you know, Peter Leaven, and they were looking at Neill Collins, and they were looking at managers that maybe out with the usual scope and trying to do something different. I'm just not sure how easy that'll be, especially with our more fortunate neighbours along the road now that James McPeak's gone, I suppose. But yeah, I'm not sure how that'll all work out. But yeah, still just a great unknown, really. So to answer your question, no.
Yeah, it's interesting, that Dunfermline change in terms of whether that does actually change anything. Because obviously we've been talking about it the morning that he was sacked, and really, I don't think it does change anything, actually, because I think there are. First of all, I think they'll hire Ian Murray. That's
I was
the
going
main
to say
thing.
It'll just stop the usual bring Ian Murray back.
Yeah,
can he? He's going to Dunfermline.
Yeah, I think he will. I think that looks just very like convenient for everyone. Like, I don't see, from his point of view, where another suitable job like that is going to crop up. Now, he's shown himself that he's willing to go abroad to work and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that like he'd never work again if he doesn't take this job, but it's convenient at a level that he's proven, all that kind of stuff. I don't see that. Like, his next best option, realistically, is waiting for Rhys McCabe to get sacked, and then you're looking at a team that's basically already down. And I don't see it. It looks like, you know, the best he's going to do. And then, from Dunfermline's point of view, they're looking at the same list of like usual suspects that we are broadly, which, you know, in terms of like your bookies lists, which is Liam Fox and all these guys that we've all been quite down on. I think their only other thing would be they've got this ownership question, whether their new owners have some wild and wacky market to go and find managers from. But I suspect they won't, given they're not in yet. So that just looks like almost certainly that would be Ian Murray. But I think, as you just said, first time around, the paper talk was usual suspects, Liam Fox, these guys. But it seemed like certainly the guys who got further down the line of that actual recruitment process weren't the people that we were naming straight away. So that is where I would expect we're probably looking again, but it's very different. Last time around, as much as the eventual process maybe didn't show much of it, there was more control from the Rovers' point of view, and there was more, we are being proactive and we are going out and looking, and you don't know how much groundwork they'd been able to do ahead of time, back channels, sounding people out. Like David Healy's a good example. Someone somewhere has said he might be interested. Like, he's one of hundreds of managers outside of Scotland. Someone has brought his name to the top of the list.
Well, from my understanding, he applied. I think that was kind of implied by Barrowman in one of the interviews, that he'd actually put in an application. He'd sent his own CV in to then turn it down.
Because that's... Yeah. So you wonder, like... You're kind of waiting on that scenario again this time around.
Totally.
But again, it's very different. We spoke about it a lot. It's a different dynamic. Like, sacking your manager a week into the season when you are ostensibly one of the favourites for the league is very different to your manager walking out the door when you're 6th or 7th or 8th and you haven't been doing particularly well and it's about to be January. Alan, where are your thoughts on the overall kind of matter at the moment?
It's kind of tough, innit? Because you kind of, without wanting to cover the same ground we did on whatever day it was, Sunday, you think you want a guy in as quickly as possible to give him January, but I think it's much more important to get the right guy in than it is to get somebody in quickly. We don't, like, it's not worth ending up with Liam Fox just to get him in. And I actually feel bad. I'm sure Liam Fox is a lovely guy and we're all really kind of down on him. But, you don't want to be rushing the process to get somebody in when, Potter and Mickey are perfectly capable of kind of keeping things ticking over for a while. We're probably already in the kind of at the point of thinking, let's just almost write this season off, finish mid-table, get it out of the way, and start again next season. That old word transitional, as we've used before. So it's kind of it's all very weird. It's also strange that we're not. It isn't strange that we're not hearing anything from the club. We're not used to it because the club's communication has been really good since the new board took over. But ultimately, as you said, it's Christmas. Like, folk are off. Not only are the guys from the club off, the volunteers who would be putting the stuff out, the Wraith TV guys, they're all entitled to time off as well. I think we need to remember that sometimes, that people have got lives outside of thing. It's not their priority is not necessarily going down to Starks Park on Christmas Eve and doing an interview just to stop some of the complete and utter lunatics on Pie and Bovril for coming out with their usual rubbish. So.
Yeah, and I think there's maybe a bit of a lesson being learned around to speculating a little bit, because we saw that last time, where when the first interview was done, Andrew Barrowman was clearly feeling very confident about how things were going, had a name in mind, didn't say anything concrete, but sort of allowed himself to say, look, it's not going to take a really long time. It's, we're far enough down the road. And actually, aye, exactly. There's far too many unknowns until the ink's dry. To a certain extent, I think that actually is the same thing that, like, Neill Collins got a bit of flack for doing his post-match interview at Queen's Park and not mention anything. But, like, until you actually have things absolutely squared away, it's not worth, like, breaking cover. You just...
Business as usual.
Yeah.
So I do think there's obviously a requirement for more communication, but it has to be done properly, and you need to have something to communicate as well.
Right.
So, like, ultimately, I think we have the facts as they stand. Like, we know what's happened. We know that Sacramento Republic paid a clause that existed in Neill Collins' contract. We're never going to find out how much that was, so
no,
that's fine.
There'll be plenty of figures bouncing about though.
Aye, exactly.
Most of which
but-
were made up.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think the way we have to look at it, as you said, Blair, is it's a fresh start rather than a back to square one.
Yeah.
Because we're not back to square one because we've played quite a few games. But what will be interesting, and this is, I'm glad I don't have to make this decision, is the type of manager who comes in next. Because I think what we've seen from Neill Collins is he's not a pragmatist. He's not a firefighter. Like, he's not these really specialising in the English Premier League. Guys like Sam Allardyce, who you've got 8 games to go, you need 12 points to stay up, and you bring a guy in who just basically kicks the door down, sets you up to do a certain thing a certain way, and achieves what has to be done in the short term. That's quite clearly not what Neill Collins does, because it's not what he's done. No. So what we were looking at then was, longer term, can he really develop and really... And look, his track record shows that he's a good manager, particularly over a longer term when he was at Tampa. And I think it's very telling that he's been taken by a club who's putting a lot of money into a very big project. But it means that now we have to make that decision again. And it is a case of, do you basically say, well, that's the long-term responsible thing to do, is get someone who works on a long-term basis to make you better. But that opens up this door again of, what if it happens again? What if you bring in somebody who is like, right, over the next 3 years, this is what we're going to do. And then 6 months in, they get taken away. It's very...
People forget that with Ian Murray, though. Like, Ian Murray was reported to be in for the Dundee job. There was talk of him going to Hibs at one point. Mm-hmm. Like, at any point, he could have just disappeared. Do you know what I mean? And as much as people will say, like, the board showed him no loyalty or whatever, I'm not entirely sure he showed enough a lot of loyalty. I don't think loyalty exists in this game. It's too short-lived. I do think the big thing with the communication, though, the big difference this time is it's not of the board's doing. And so I don't think the onus is on them to speak, because
that makes sense.
Before they made that decision, and like you say, when they made that decision, they were 2-3 weeks potentially down the line in terms of planning. So they had something to say. Like, if what we are being told is true, they're a week ahead of us. They found out the week before he left that he was leaving. So, you know what I mean? Like you say, they've got nothing to say. There's one name that I do kind of want us to chat about a little bit, is Rhys McCabe.
Okay.
Because, like, at the beginning of the season, so in August, when Murray was sacked, I think the majority of Rovers fans, and myself included, were very much okay with Rhys McCabe coming in. Mm-hmm. Both as a player and as a manager, I have to say. I don't like him personally. He winds me up, his little face. But at that point, you were like, by the way. But at the same time, we'd all said through the summer, like, Airdrie are going to be in trouble this year. They've been ripped apart. The recruitment's not been great or whatever. And I'm wondering, this far down the line, as bad as Airdrie are, but also the amount of injuries that they've had, is now a good time, because he's bound to be cheaper than he would have been 3 months ago, is now a good time to go in and get Rhys McCabe. Because I actually wonder if Dunfermline will be after him as well. As much as Murray will be in the front line for that job, I still think Rhys McCabe can do a job. Like, is he an option for us? Because he plays the right type of football. He might be a longer term project. He might just slot in.
It totally comes down to how you assess football managers, and I don't think there's one version of the truth. A little bit like we talked about with Ian Murray, like the first half of last season versus the second half. Like, was it all Ian Murray's doing that we were as good as we were? Was it all his fault that we dropped off as much as we did? Well, like, probably not either of those. So when you look at last year's Airdrie, they overperformed massively, I think, based on how people thought they would do at the start of the season. This season, they've then underperformed. So it's how much do you attribute that to Rhys McCabe either way?
We're definitely not taking McPake.
No,
There's a thing with McCabe as well. Obviously, you can look at it and say, yeah, they were ripped apart in the summer, but ultimately they've not recruited well enough with the players they brought in. But there's a big question mark over how much input he has in the recruitment and how much is just down to, here's a catalogue of Concilium sports players. You can ignore the first 10 pages because they're no coming. Choose your players from the rest of there. Because it does seem that, Jackie McNamara, for example, seems to have an awfully big influence in which players they sign. And, if Rhys McCabe was given free rein, you wonder how many of those guys would have been brought in. I would suggest there's a few that wouldn't have.
But I mean, he has the one thing we didn't have under Murray, which is an identity. We kept talking about it. You don't know how the Rovers are going to play. And I don't think we ever got there with Neill Collins either. We saw flashes of it against Ayr that potentially we were going to be this swashbuckling, catch you on the counter, high press, kind of high energy side. But he could never put it together. Whereas you could still look at Airdrie and go, I know how Airdrie are going to play. Like, they play decent football, they get the ball down, and they try and play through you. Like, I don't know if he's a bad option.
Have you given any
that out there?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Any consideration to a promotion from within? And probably setting aside John Potter and Mickey Cameron, but for what it's worth, Paul Hanlon is relatively high up the bookies list. Is that something you can see, Blair?
No, I have to say, for me, I'm never a massive fan of it. This is going to sound really like, and if any opposition fans are listening again, why? Because this is not for you. But it sounds like total hubris. But I feel like we're too big. I feel like we're too big a side to be an experiment. Like, I think there have been times in the past, like when McGlynn came in at the Rovers, we were in dire straits. So you take somebody with no experience, like a Liam Fox. There is a time and a place for that manager to come into your club when the expectations are a bit lower. But no, I think the difference now is we need somebody with at least a bit of a vision, like an idea, an identity, an idea of how they want to set their team up and how they want to play. And with absolutely no managerial experience, he may well have an idea of what he wants to do. He might well be a fantastic manager. I just think the risk's too big.
Yeah, I don't think it's the right time for that, personally. Kind of because of the situation that we're in and the fact that we're recruiting for the second time already this season. It's a real, just from an optics point of view,
totally.
It's a real, like, it looks like, we couldn't find anybody else. Like, you didn't, by all accounts, whoever it could be, because, I mean, there's other guys in there. But, like, Callum Fordyce has been an assistant. Lewis Stevenson, I'm sure, could, if he wanted to, get himself into these types of conversations. But it would be very much a case of, like, you didn't really make the final round last time, and we're kind of just dropping to it now.
Yeah. You kind of feel like these guys tend to stand out as well. Like, for a team that we don't have an identity, that there's been question marks about leadership on the pitch at times, which can be complete nonsense for all we know. But if someone's going to step out of a squad and be a player manager, you almost feel like we would have seen signs of it in terms of the way they are on the pitch. And obviously, I have
leader.
I have no footballing ability or knowledge, really, other than I turn up on a Saturday and watch it. So it may well be there, and I've just not seen it. It could be slapping me in the face, and I probably wouldn't see it, to be honest. But it doesn't. I think the reasons that you've kind of mentioned are probably more important. That it's not the right time. We're not in that bad a position where we're looking at that. I don't want to say desperate. That makes it sound like we've got really no options. But I don't see it happening.
Yeah, just a quick point as well, because we mentioned the bookies odds a fair bit. It really is just because they've bothered their arse to put a list together. It's really completely. Not because I'm attaching any weight to it. I remember saying this the last time around. Like, currently, if you look at McBookie's odds, Liam Fox is the favourite, but they will give you double your money back for him, which means they have not got any inclination that it's actually him at all. Like, as we said, Ian Murray looks like a tap-in for that Dunfermline job, and he's still 13-8. Like, there's no... The second anyone has any actual knowledge in that market, it'll fall through the floor. That there's none of that at all.
If we all go and stick a fiver on Neil Lennon now, he'll be the odds-on favourite within a couple of hours.
Aye, exactly. And I think we have seen that Starks Park in its current iteration holds its water fairly well. So, yes, I wouldn't be putting any great faith in what the bookies are telling us. I see, until you see somebody that's 3-1 on, it's speculation. But on the subject of speculation, let's depart from our norm and speculate wildly about something. Blair, how do you imagine the squad are feeling at the moment?
Rudderless. That's different from ruddenless. Ruddenless is a good place to be. No, I imagine they are feeling a little bit kind of dejected. Maybe not. I mean, footballers are kind of notoriously sure of themselves, I suppose, is probably the best way to put it. Like, you can't make a career in football unless you think that you're going to be okay, no matter what happens. Do you know what I mean? The football is littered with these guys that have signed for the Old Firm or signed for Man City, and everyone goes, why? You're never going to get a game. But if you think like that, like, you're never going to make it in this game. You've got to always imagine you're going to be the one that bucks the trend. So I imagine the players will probably be, like I say, a little bit kind of put out by it. But something you said at the very beginning of the show before, we have precedents for this. We have been here before. And Mickey and John Potter took over before and we beat Partick Thistle. So the evidence in front of them would suggest that actually they can be okay. They're not getting another manager with another set of ideas yet. They have the opportunity to effectively do what they would have been doing anyway. The guys would have been on the training field. The plan probably was already in place for the Livingston game before he went, at least in terms of how they thought they were going to set up, and they'll know who's available and who's not available. They know who's in form and who's not in form and all of these kind of things. So for all intents and purposes, as much as a caretaker ever can, you'd hope it's business as usual. But they're bound to be reeling a bit. Because, I mean, somebody said before, did they find out an hour before the announcement, apparently? That's
the story I'd heard. Which, again, I think makes sense because that story didn't break ahead of time. And if there is a sure way to make sure it does, it's tell 26 guys ahead of time. So I can well believe that. Alan, do you think is there scope from a footballing point of view for a bit of a siege mentality? Football guys love a siege mentality. Is this a batten down the hatches, everybody's against us?
There's certainly not even so much. More, I think everyone's watching on, waiting for us to fail, kind of thing. Thinking it'd be quite funny. If I was a fan of another team, I'd think it was hilarious. So I totally get that. So I think there'll be a bit of that. I think just for this week in particular as well, I think that the team are going to be really fired up for this, because we could easily have had 6 points against Livingston this season and we've come away with none. So I think the players, I think they've got something to prove in that sense anyway, that we can cope with big physical Livingston and kind of match them. But there's definitely we've got a good squad. Like, there's no getting away from that. A lot of them haven't played as well this season as they have previously for us. But, you'd like to think they've all got enough about them to be saying, right, we've got something to prove here that we're in a false position. And we didn't need a manager to get us to do that. We know what we're doing. We're experienced enough. Let's just go out there and do it. With a couple of exceptions, of course, some of the young lads they've never been through something like this. But that's where the older players need to kind of drag them through it, really. And there's plenty of older players that do that.
I was going to say, there's an argument to be said that every single player in the squad's been through this. So,
well, there is
that's what I'm saying. Like, do you know what I mean? They have, though. Every single one of them has been through this already. And actually, probably, now maybe not more shocking. Actually, that's not true. Probably less shocking, but at least equally as floundering at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I think the thing, you've already said it, there is at least an element of continuity through it as well.
Yeah.
So, like, to use Dunfermline as the example, so they sacked James McPeak and Dave Mackay, and the guy who they've brought in as the caretaker is a youth coach. Now, I've genuinely no idea. I don't know how much involvement he's had, but if he's the youth coach, there's every chance he's not been in every day with the first team up till now. He's possibly away somewhere else for at least some of their training sessions. So they've got a bit more of a different voice and a different approach, potentially. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, given, and I'm not trying to have a go at them, but given how poor they've been, that might be what they need, actually, is somebody to come in and do things completely differently. You would expect with the Rovers it's going to be very different because Mickey's still there, John Potter's still there, and they have been all the way through. So, you wouldn't necessarily expect sort of a sea change. And again, you could argue it the other way. You could argue maybe what they need is something completely different. But for right now, that is probably a better thing. Given how much change there has been, actually still having broadly the same ways of working and all that kind of stuff probably does help for the time being. And then again, it's a case of asking that question all over again when somebody else new comes in. Right, let's have a quick break and then we'll come back and talk about the game against Livingston.
A football club is nothing without its community, and this Christmas there are people in our community who need your help. Kirkcaldy Foodbank provided enough food for more than 368,000 meals last year, and sadly, demand continues to rise. A third of all the support they provide goes to children, and we have to make sure that they can continue to help those who need it most. The Kirkcaldy Foodbank Christmas campaign has a number of vouchers available to buy to make it easy for you to help cover the cost of this vital assistance, and they start from just £5. Please visit kirkcaldyfoodbankcharity.org.uk to find out more and to donate today.
Now there is a bit of a the more things change, the more they stay the same with this game against Livingston, because the last time they came to Starks Park, it was also the caretaker management team of John Potter and Mickey Cameron who were in charge. A really kind of threadbare Rovers side that day. I'd sort of forgotten that until I went back and looked at it. Like, I remember feeling that I was really hard done by, really unlucky to lose that late goal. But we only named 5 subs that day. We didn't have a right back at all. And after an hour, Ewan Murray went off injured and was replaced by Aidan Connolly, which never feels like an appropriate substitution. And it was more or less the last kick of the game from a foul throw. Livingston got that win. Alan, given that game and the visit we had to the designer outlet more recently, where we've come away with nothing, do Livingston owe us one to some degree this season?
I think we owe them one more than anything else. I mean, they've had an awful lot of luck. Like, they go about their business as they always do under Martindale. You kind of know what you're getting for them, and it's almost like both times they've just kind of ground us down. But I think we owe them one to kind of actually match them physically, which we need to do. But I think we've got the tools to go in there and do it. And I think if we could probably need a bit of luck, as you tend to in football. But yeah, I'd say we owe them one more than them owe us. So.
Blair, Livingston, to lean into the world of cliches once again, sort of quietly going about their business this season. So they've only lost 2 league games all year. Inexplicably get beat 3-0 at East End Park. Somehow.
Yeah, I know.
and then they get beat 1-0 by Ayr just at the weekend there. I mean, until that 1-0 win, 1-0 loss, sorry, I was starting to think they were a bit of they were like the Michael Myers of the Scottish Championship, just like slowly but unstoppably moving forward all the time. Unlike, obviously Falkirk, much showier, much higher ceiling, maybe. But as Allan just said there, Livingston sort of keep you within arm's reach and then, well, as far as the Rovers are concerned, beat you at the final bell. Do you see Livingston sort of maintaining a title challenge over the rest of the year, given what you've seen from them so far?
Yeah, is the honest answer. I think I'd go back to something Allan said on the, might be in the emergency pod actually. I would expect Livingston to chuck a bit of money at this January actually. I would be expecting them to make 1 or 2 signings at least. I think the way that they came down, everybody thought, they're going to be a bit meh. And to be fair, I said the same thing. Like pre-season, I was like, I don't know who half their squad is. Like, looking at the names and stuff, everybody felt like a gamble. And I do kind of wonder if there was an element of, let's see where we are in January, and if they're decent in January, with a little bit of extra cash thrown in, we'll get ourselves back up to the Premier League and get back to filling our ground with away fans. So I would fully imagine that they're going to actually strengthen, probably more so than most, in terms of the money that they're bound to have kicking about with the parachute payments and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I do. I think they're best placed to run Falkirk as far as they can. They clearly are not as free flowing or attacking or pretty as what Falkirk are, but with the best will in the world, if you ask me which of those two teams has the best chance of surviving at the bottom end of the Premier League, it's Livingston, because pretty doesn't work in the Premier League. I mean, look at us last season. We went up to Ross County, who were murder, and we got absolutely battered because they're huge. They are absolutely giant. And it turns out that you can do whatever you want in the Championship. You can get out the Championship playing fast-flowing, pretty football. You will not survive in the Premier League doing it. And I think that'll be a really interesting conundrum going forward if Falkirk were to go up. Because I don't see McGlynn, I can see him holding to it more so than anybody else.
Yes.
Whereas Martindale, I think, will just do what he needs to do to win football games. Yep. So yeah, I think they will. I think they'll continue to be a bit of a strength. But they still feel beatable. It's a weird kind of going into this game, even with the situation we're in. I fancy us more than I would going in against Falkirk.
It's they're a funny side, Livingston, in that it's starting to feel like the rabbit and the hare. No, that doesn't make sense. They're the same thing. Tortoise and the hare.
Tortoise and the hare.
With Livingston and Falkirk. Obviously, we'll wait and see what happens by the end of the season. But you hear people talking about who's been the best player in the division so far, and you'll hear people list 4 Falkirk players before they get to somebody who plays for Livingston. But looking at Livy, I mean, they get beat by Ayr United, but they made 5 subs across the course of that game. And there's not really a drop-off. Like in the way that you said there, Blair, when you look at their team, there's nobody who really stands out. Like, there's guys like Robbie Muirhead, where you're like, I mean, he's like fine at this level, and he's big, and he chucks himself about, and he's got enough technical ability that he looks like Drogba anytime he plays against us. But he's not a standout. He's never going to be the player of the year. But they seem to have just like 18 guys like that. Like, there's not a big drop-off. They've got a bigger squad of like similar level guys. And I think that's where like your late winners and stuff come from. We talked about it a lot last year. Where, like, even Falkirk actually have a pretty small squad. Like, there's not a lot of depth there. Their starting 11's excellent. It's better than Livingston's. But as winter starts to bite and, you know, your heavy legs, all this stuff, I wonder if it's not Livingston who are actually better positioned just with this bigger squad of 6 foot tall guys who can do a job. And
I
actually,
was just going to say that. It's like Champ Man, isn't it? Like you used to go in and you could filter the player search by whatever you wanted. And it's like Martindale's went, right, 6'1", there's your minimum height. And like, he's just, the team's full of Goliaths. Like, they're massive. And it's probably not as effective in the Championship, which is why they've stuttered a couple of times and why they'll draw a few games. But they'll never get blown away because they are big physical Livingston. But I do genuinely think that if the two of those teams, and there's a world where both of them go up, my money would be on Livingston surviving more than it would be on Falkirk unless they strengthen.
I think what Livingston do is and it's probably they're so used to being the weakest team in the league, from all the time in the Premiership. They let you have the ball. You get a lot more of the ball against Livingston than you do against Falkirk. And I think that makes them seem more beatable because you've got more possession, you've got more territory, you get more chances. But then what they've also got is they've got two really, really good experienced centre-halves in there, and McGowan and Wilson, guys that have played at a far higher level than this, international caps and everything. So they just basically back them to stay solid at the back and say, right, have the ball, come at us, we'll just stop you. And then we'll go up and we'll win a corner and we'll send our 7'3" guy Nottingham up there to score because none of you are going to beat him in the air. Falkirk feel more relentless because they just keep coming at you in wave after wave after wave and they don't give you time to breathe. Whereas Livingston, you get more of that, so they feel more beatable. But like as Blair says, it probably gives them more tools to survive if they go up.
Aye, it feels. I seem to be developing a habit of saying this in every single podcast we do now. But the kind of bandwidth in the squad that they've got, they like Livingston on their worst day and Livingston on their best day. There's actually not a huge difference between it because they're so solid. And I feel like we're maybe
and they can beat either one as well.
To be fair, yeah, well, like because we've seen it, they've beaten us twice. And they didn't play particularly well, but they took 6 points. And actually, that's like there's something to be said for that. Like,
that's how you survive in the Premier League, isn't it?
You take a team that does that.
That's how they've survived for as long as they have.
And like Ryan McGowan, I think is a great example of the kind of guy that Livingston are building a really good season on the back of, because I'm sure, whether he was offered to them or otherwise, there would be managers in the Championship who'd have looked at Ryan McGowan and gone, actually, not keen on him. Like, he's a year or two too far. St Johnstone kept him hanging on really late into the window. But I imagine David Martindale was straight on the phone to him, because like, that's a guy I can build a defence around. Like, he's not going to win Player of the Year. I don't need him to win Player of the Year. I need him to do 7 or 8 out of 10 every single week. And I don't need to worry about him. Don't even need to, like, he could turn up late if he wants. He can miss team talks, he can miss training. It doesn't matter. He's going to do his job. And it will be interesting to see how they respond, as I say, because they only lost their second game of the season last time out. There is, potential that this is the start of a wobble for them. But it's really going to be up to the Rovers to go and try and see if there is a weakness there. See if they are a little bit fragile coming off the back of that. I suspect if there are fragility stakes, the Rovers might be slightly higher up there, given the week that we've had versus what I'm sure has just been a lovely week that the Livingston players have had. But in terms of the Rovers side, we will need to find 11 players from somewhere. And this, well, once again, we're back into just spinning the big tombola of not only selection, but systems, all this
formations,
kind of stuff. I mean, we saw, even in the relatively, actually, as far as caretakers go, it wasn't relatively brief. It was quite a big caretaker stint earlier in the season. A fair bit of variety in that. There was back threes, there was back fours, there was a lot of different guys got a run out at right back. So, Blair, I want you to give me as we always do, give me an 11. Do you feel like you have a strong grip on what you expect to see from John Potter and Colin Cameron?
Honestly, not a clue. Mainly because we still don't know who's fit. Because with the types of players that we've got that are on the verge of fitness, it completely changes your team. You know, you're not talking about young boys that might make the bench, might not make the bench, or bit part players. You know, and no disrespect to them, but if we were talking about, you know, Josh Mullen might be fit, Josh Mullen might not be fit, probably doesn't change your starting 11. But when you're talking about Scott Brown, you're talking about Jack Hamilton, potentially Sam Stanton, we still don't know what's going on with him. Like, with all of the unknowns that we have, it completely changes the makeup of the side. We still don't know how many attacking players we have fit. We still don't know if Easton's fit. We don't know if Cody David's fit. You know, they might have recovered. They might have got worse. Like, we don't know anything. I think that's and based on last time round, John Potter's going to say nothing. His pre-match interview is going to be 2.5 minutes of wishing everybody a Merry Christmas, saying that he ate a couple of mince pies, and wishing everybody well for Saturday, because he's not going to say a word. He's going to say absolutely nothing. Oh, it was great. Boys came in and trained. They worked really hard. No, you wouldn't know anything had happened. Everybody's at it. Business as usual. Move on. There you go. There's your interview. You're getting nothing else. So no idea. So I mean, team-wise, I'm pretty much going for the same team that I said for the Queen's Park game, in the hope that either Jack Hamilton or Cody David are fit. Probably Cody David more than anything, in for Kai Montague, and just going 4-4-2. But he might go 3 at the back. He might. We played. I remember there being a story about how the players had come up with a formation in training, and a formation they wanted to play for the Partick game. I don't know again how true any of this is, but it was like a 4-1-4-1 type formation. That was when Easton was playing more centrally. Maybe they try that again. God knows.
Yeah, that's that. I'm kind of in the same place as you in terms of when I started writing something out, and I was like, it feels like with what we know or who we might have, I'm sort of sticking with a 4-4-2 that worked against Dunfermline and worked second half against Queen's Park. I am operating on the assumption that Dylan Easton and Cody David being fit enough for the bench at Hampden might mean they're fit enough for this. But as you say, absolutely no guarantees of that whatsoever. So that leads me to a 4-4-2 with Easton on the left, Connell on the right, and then Cody David and Lewis Jameson up front. But it really, it's an open book. It really is. It could be. We've actually, played an inordinate number of different formations and systems and all that kind of stuff this season. It's probably important. I don't think there's anything that would surprise me, is where I'm trying to come around to here. Like, really, we'll get the lineup at 2:00 and it'll be a case of like, this could be in it. Exactly.
Because how do you play against them though? That's the kind of difficulty, because you know there are teams you come up against, like Queen's Park on Friday night pass, where you're like, you know, back four, relatively kind of young and naive, maybe crosses into the box, maybe 4-4-2 is the way to go. You get wide, you get balls into the box, and you test them and you hammer them and you see how you go. You can't do that against Livingston. They've got 4 centre halves. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like Stoke back in the day. They just play these 4 Goliaths along the back line, and you've got to try and beat them. So, the blueprint for it, I suppose, is probably, I never made the game, but the game at Livingston before, where Dick got sent off, and do you know what I mean? We went kind of more physical with them, and we kind of went a bit more toe-to-toe with them and tried to play through them, but with the personnel we've got, I'm not even sure that works this time round. It's a total mess.
Alan, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm sitting there thinking about a lineup, and I was like, okay, I'm thinking we'll go 3-5-2, something like that. But then the team that I'm coming up with in my head, I was like, you can't leave Aidan Connolly out. We've got so used to leaving Aidan Connolly out because we didn't know what was happening with him. But then after that performance at Hampden last week, and if he's fit, he's got to start. You can't leave him out.
He's a striker now.
Well, potentially he plays up front with LG. You never know if
Yeah.
you've not got David or Hamilton fit. Ideally, you want Jack Hamilton back in for two reasons. He adds aerial presence in both boxes, and he likes a goal against Livy. He does like a goal against them. Seems to be over there more than here written off, or Kirkcaldy written off. But I think Blair's onto something. Actually, we're saying we might do something similar to what we did at the Set Fair Arena or whatever the hell we're calling it these days. The last time, and that you're tempted to bring Liam Dick in for a bit of extra aerial presence. Not that he's giant and he's nothing compared to the Livy guys, but he just gives you that a wee bit more in that sense. So your two ways of looking at that is either a back three or you bring him in at left back for Stevenson. I think we might go for the latter and try and keep that kind of 4-4-2. I'm hoping that Easton's fit on the left. Obviously, Burnham Matthews in the middle, Connolly on the right, and then LG and hopefully Hamilton up front is what and Kevin goals. Obviously, that's the one bit I'm fairly certain of. Unless he's fallen over a Christmas present or something over the last few days and hurt himself, Kev will be in goals, and you're probably looking at Hanlon and Murray as they seem a pretty set centre half pairing now. But ultimately, none of us will be anywhere close. It feels harsh on guys like Montague dropping out, but I don't think this is a game for him. As much as he's quite physical for a young lad. He can put himself about. I don't think this is a game for him.
You make a really good point there about just kind of height across the team. Because I'm looking at mine, looking at the one I've written down. It's not a big side. And actually, just in as you explained it there, I now actually think we probably will play a back three with that in mind. Because Freeman will play right back.
Yeah.
And he said himself in his interview after the Dunfermline game, it was quite kind of open and honest, where he was like, I lost a few headers early doors to Lewis McCann, but grew into the game, and he absolutely did. And I thought he was excellent at, or certainly at least good enough for what we needed that day. Did his job, but he will be up against Tete Yengi this time out. I would be very inclined to have a back three so that you've got Murray able to basically join in that battle without leaving Stevie May one-on-one with Paul Hanlon. Because, looking at that, if you've got Freeman and Stevenson as your fullbacks, like not a lot of height in there at all, really, before you start. And as you say, if Hamilton's missing, you're struggling. Particularly given, as you say, Aidan Connolly effectively is on the last couple of games basically undroppable. So, yes, I think this will be a very tricky outing, really. And I don't mean to be kind of pessimistic. I just looking at what we've seen from Livingston, not just in games against us, but the other games that they have. They know what they're doing. They're good at what they do. And of all the teams in the division, if you were kind of mapping them out, I think some of their key strengths are some of our key weaknesses. But it will be interesting to see, because such is the nature of football that, if you're giving something away somewhere, you tend to be able to get it back somewhere else. So is there pace in this Rovers side that they will find difficult to deal with, or something along those lines? But certainly not the easiest for caretakers to be coming back into. I think this is going to be quite a tactical game in that sense. So it will be very interesting to see where that comes from. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to add, Blair?
No. I'm actually weirdly looking forward to it. Like, I do kind of fancy us in a weird way. Like, I do think that siege mentality thing is quite powerful. So I am kind of looking forward to seeing how we go and seeing how we start. And I just hope that the boys can put together a kind of a 90 minutes that settles people down a little bit, because I think it'll be quite a kind of a weird atmosphere at Starks Park. But yeah, we'll see how it comes. But I'm not worried. Like, weirdly, I'm not kind of panicking about it.
It feels like we've kind of gone beyond having to just be worried about individual games at the moment. It's like there are other things to be resolved, bigger picture things than just one game against Livingston. But I would hope that there's a bit of I don't know if siege mentality is the right word, but I'm not going to come up with it's 2 words for a start. I'm not going to come up with better ones. Something along those lines from the stands as well. Like a bit of the players have done, nothing wrong. The players haven't been... I think they have a right to feel a bit unfairly treated, or they're turning up and doing their work every day, and they're dealing with all these disruptions. So I would hope that there's support for the team, if nothing else. Alan, for you, any final thoughts?
I mean, I'm one of the more optimistic fans anyway. I kind of feel the same way as Blair. As much as everyone points to Livingston bouncing back and getting the win they need to stay in touch, I feel pretty confident with it. Something I never actually thought of until Blair was speaking is, obviously I've talked about McGowan and Wilson being kind of a decent, solid centre-back pairing. What they're not is particularly mobile and quick. Lewis Jameson up top with somebody playing with him could give them a lot of trouble, I think. Especially if you've got Connolly and hopefully Easton supporting them. So there are reasons to be positive there. We will get possession and territory. It's about how we use it. And we kind of showed last week that we're starting to maybe take chances when they're few and far between, and we're actually looking a bit more dangerous. So, yeah, why not? Let's go. Let's take them.
4-0 Rovers. 2 penalties, 2 free kicks.
Merry fucking Christmas. Love it.
Yeah. Perfect. I think that will do it for today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You've had a lot of us from this podcast the last few days. And we will be back again at some point over the weekend after this game to talk it all through. And then, see if we can get 3 or 4 days without having to get back together again. So we will see you again soon. We'll see you then. Thanks again, and goodbye.